Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's okay today.
Yeah.
Today's topic is linking with other support services. The first step in escaping an abusive situation is realizing that you're not alone and it's not your fault. If you're considering leaving, be careful who you tell. It's important your partner does not know where you're going. Free, confidential support and advice is available to victims and their concerned family members or friends 24 hours a day. If you're worried a friend is being abused, let them know you've noticed something wrong. They might not be ready to talk, but try to find quiet times when they can talk if they choose to. If someone confides in you that they're suffering from a domestic abuse, listen and take care not to blame them. Acknowledge it takes strength to talk to someone about experiencing abuse. Give them time to talk, but do not push them to talk if they do not want to. Acknowledge they're in a frightening and difficult situation. Tell them nobody deserves to be threatened or beaten, despite what the abuser said. Support them as a friend. Encourage them to express their feelings and allow them to make their own decisions. Do not tell them to leave the relationship if they're not ready. That's their decision. Ask if they have suffered physical harm, and if they have, offer to go with them to a hospital or GP. Help them report the assault to police if they choose to. Be ready to provide information about organizations that offer help for people experiencing domestic abuse. So this is a quick one this morning. And back to you, Cecily. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tombe, for that. And as we continue with the conversation, just bear in mind what Tombe has mentioned there and what you can see on the screen. You know, a few ways that we can all address gender-based violence. We can be a friend to somebody. Hence why we are saying everybody has a role to play. Yeah. And as this next slide shows there, you know, health systems can help women survivors of violence during COVID. We know the reason why we have this is that we know this has had a, you know, COVID has had a huge implication within the communities. We know how much domestic violence, particularly, has skyrocketed within a period of time. But it's knowing who to report to or how to support that particular woman as we go along. So for now, I'll stop sharing. We'll come back to watching a very short video to reinforce what Tombe has shared there and what we will have covered. But for now, I will bring Nina in to give us what she has from the local authorities, and then Sahib will take us through the polls. So over to you, Nina.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here today. Just wanted to speak today about the Stay Well and Warm this winter campaign that the Public Health and Wellbeing team have put together to get people informed about what's happening locally in terms of activities they can get involved in, but also some really useful tips on what they can do to stay well, warm, and also about the benefits and mental health resources available. So I'm going to put in the chat the link that links to that page on the RBC website. And we've been liaising with Ritu to share this with the network, ACA network. So hopefully a wider range of people will be able to find out this useful information. And please share with your networks, because it's really useful information about what's happening locally during the winter, particularly around the flu vaccinations and the booster campaigns as well. Thank you, Cecily.
Fantastic, and thank you, Nina, for continuing updates that you give us, and especially in terms of the 16 days of activism. It has been fantastic. And so on that note, I will bring Saif in to give us the poll so that to inform the conversation ahead of us.
Thank you, Cecily. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's okay. So yeah, as Cecily said, I'm going to go through the polls today. Sorry I'm not here every week. Some weeks I just have meetings that I can't miss, so I have to miss this, and I feel really bad, but I'm here this week, so yay. So there are 2 questions on the poll this week. You should be able to see it now. I'll go through the questions and then in your own time, just answer them, and then afterwards we'll discuss them. So the first question is, with regards to gender-based violence, how important is it to get support? So your options are, it's very important, it's not important, or you're not sure. For the second question, it is, how easy and comfortable is it to seek support? How easy and comfortable is it to seek support for support against gender-based violence? So it's always easy, it's not easy, or are you not sure? So I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to answer those, and then we'll go through them. Cool. It's cold today. I've got my thermals on and everything, even though I'm inside the house. Okay, almost everyone has answered, so I'll just give everyone 30 more seconds or so. Okay, brilliant. So I will put the poll up now, the answers even. So you should be able to see them now. So for the first question, I'll repeat the question and then we'll discuss the one answer everyone put. So with regards to gender-based violence, how important is it to get support? Everyone said very important. I think I agree. It's very, very important. It's hard to discuss this one, isn't it? Because no one's really going to say no, or no one's going to say they're not sure for something like this. But would anyone like to discuss their views on this? Feel free to come off mic and we can talk about it. I think personally, I think it's quite important because, well, it kind of links to what our topics have been the last few weeks about, like domestic violence and things like that, and how sometimes it's not always talked about. That was like quite a big thing that we said, like if it's men, if it's men that are the victims in a domestic abuse situation, it's not really talked about, therefore they won't get support necessarily. But it's really important that they do. It's just as important in any scenario, because that can lead to, you know, mental health problems in the future, or that can lead to more like continued abuse, you know. So it's just, I think it's really, really important that these things are talked about more, so that support can be funneled in more. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other thoughts, Cecily?
And yeah, the other thing is why it is important to really access support is because a problem shared is a problem half solved. Yeah, and really to demystify the, you know, to remove the stigma that there is around some of these issues. It is important that we talk more about them, and by talking, we are effectively seeking for support. Support becomes easier because you'll have somebody who will have a solution to what you are talking about.
I agree. And also, you know, as science you said, it will lead to complications. People die because of all this. We've seen recently in the news women being killed, and police were blamed for not doing anything, because the things they went through started like, you know, little stuff, but it ended up in death. you know, if they had sought support or mentioned it earlier, perhaps it wouldn't have led to death and all those complications. So it's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, definitely. Thank you, Grace.
Yeah.
And now we've got another Grace with a hand up.
We've been blessed here with Grace. So grateful.
Yes, yeah. So I do agree. I think the tricky question is, yes, we do agree that it's important to have the support, but it's how comfortable are we to have that support or to approach that support, because until it's an everyday conversation right from home, it's like if you've got cancer or something, until you're comfortable of going to the doctor at any time to have your checkup, if you're not comfortable about it, if it's not if you're not open to talk about domestic violence or gender-based violence, we will always say, yes, it's good to go. It's good to have the resources available around us, but it's making that step to go to those resources. That's very important. So we need to really talk about it every day with our families, with our churches, in our workplaces. It should be just an everyday conversation, really.
Thank you, Grace. I agree. I think that's the wonderful thing about this space as well, is that we get to talk about this every week, you know, and we talk about the importance of it as well, which kind of solidifies these ideas that, you know, talking about mental health, getting support is really important. This is essentially, coming here is a type of support, isn't it? Where you like just having like kind of a space to talk about anything, I think is a really, really important thing. I see that some people just joined, so just so hi, welcome. For context, we're just going over the first question, which you should be able to see as a poll. I'll repeat the question. It's, with regards to gender-based violence, how important is it to get support? So if you want to make any points about that, feel free to put your hand up, come off mic, and we can talk about it. So yeah, would anyone else like to make a point about that? Otherwise, we can go to the second question.
I noticed Annalise is struggling to put her hand up on the system. So Annalise, you can just come in.
Sorry, I didn't see. Go for it.
Hello, can you hear and see me?
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Hi. So I'm Annalise. I work for Brighter Futures for Children, and I'm just thinking about it from a children's services angle, and just thinking how horrible the impact is for children who actually witness domestic violence in the home. Some of them, I don't know, it can be horrifying. It can go all the way to them actually coming into care, because it's having such a big impact on them. And I just think it's another angle to think about. Like, obviously it's awful for the people who are in that relationship, but the impact on younger ones as well is really important. And how, I'm not sure, obviously we offer support and stuff for that, and so do RBC with Nina, but yeah.
Thank you, Annalise. I have a question about that, which I'm just personally curious about. So if a child was in that position, how would they get support?
At children's services, so I guess at the first instance, all the things you've been talking about is that there would be reports from neighbours and from professional services coming into us about there being disruption in the home, and that would then go through what we have a children's single point of assessment. So it's a CSPAR thing, and the social workers would then go out and assess what's going on in that home, and if that there'll be plans put in place to support them from that side. So they'll have varying levels of support, like a care plan and things like that. And if they do end up having to come into care, they would have a foster family they could go to, hopefully around, so they can be in that environment either while their parents are sorting their situation out, and hopefully they'll be able to go back to their family, because that's the end goal for all of the fostering that we do.
Brilliant.
Can I come in here? I said, just retired health visitor, Annalise. We work with you guys, health visitor, So we pick up those problems with the behavior and all sorts of things. Growth, it affects the children in all aspects. So we pick up the problems and flag it up to social services. And, conferences are held and all that, and decisions are made. And either the child will be removed from the home or, whatever. So, we hand them over to analyst group and they take over and we support them, in foster care and adoption and all sorts of stuff. So, this is it. The children sorts of behavior, whatever, and all sorts of mental issues and all, it affects them in all aspects. So we pick them up when we do our development check, we visit the homes and all that. And then, history from the mother and all, science, a whole lot of issues. Okay, yes.
Thank you very much, Grace and Alice as well. Thank you, guys. Are there any other points anybody would like to add on to what was just said or make another point for themselves?
So another point on why seeking support is important in the times we are in. We know that it's, gender-based violence is very common, and it comes in all forms and shape and form. And so it's, that commonality makes it necessary for it to be, to known about, but also seek support about it. And the other important point is that, from the previous conversations, there is that barrier on cultural understanding. Yeah, some people will innocently, they are innocently perpetrators, because of the cultural differences. So I think by accessing support, then we stand on an opportunity to perhaps inform the services on those cultural differences, so that when they are supporting women and men from different cultural backgrounds, they have an understanding of how to support them. Yeah, but if we, as a community, we keep quiet with them, with the problems, there is no way the services will know how we deal with it, and of course why it happens in the first place.
Yeah, thank you, Cecily. I think that leads quite well into the second question, actually, which I'll move on to now, which is how easy and comfortable is it to seek for support against gender-based violence? So nobody said always easy. 89% of you said not easy, and 11% said not sure. So that's quite a stark difference from the first question, where everyone said it's really, really important, but just that it's not easy to access that support, or not feeling comfortable to access the support. I think I would agree with everyone when I said, when they said not easy, it's not, I wouldn't know where to go necessarily. I wouldn't know what to do, what to say, how to describe my situation. It'd feel embarrassing. It would feel like I don't know, feel like a lot of shame, that kind of thing. But yeah, if anyone wants to discuss why they think it's not easy, or if they're not sure, or if they change their mind, please do say. Not comfortable talking about it either.
Yeah, I think, Sai, you said, all that needs to be said. And I think Cecily also mentioned about the cultural differences, and lack of awareness of the situation. And people need to be empowered to do that, because, as you said, you're not sure where to go and how to narrate your story. And, the stigma and the shame, or, these all discourage people from doing it. And economic factors, people depend upon the perpetrator. And they feel, oh, if I mention this and this happening, how am I going to feed myself? How am I going to feed the children? Where am I going to live and all that? But if they know they can be fed, they'll be provided with shelter and all sorts of things, they'll be bold enough to seek whatever services. People are afraid to, say whatever because of their circumstances. They are not economic independent. You know, they depend upon the perpetrator to feed, house, and all sorts of things. So they bottle everything. And then in the end, you know, what happens? Death and all sorts of things. And it's too late. You know, children suffer and all sorts of stuff. So they may have reasons for not reporting. So it's, you know, knowing that, you know, they'll be catered for will give them the confidence to go forward and report, I think.
And I think, oh, sorry, finish.
Yeah, I think this is what I think.
And I think that's totally understandable. You know, if you're in that situation and economically you would need that support, you're in a very, very sticky place. Like what can you do, really? You don't have much choice there.
Yes.
And I think that's really important to consider. I hadn't really considered that personally. So thank you for sharing, Grace. And once again, the other Grace has raised her hand. So Grace.
Well, I'll come back. Yeah, so yes, and the other, I think, there are quite a lot of reasons really, and economic situation is one of them. But also is, as somebody mentioned about culture, where you could be saying, because of my children, I cannot, you know, I have to sacrifice because I can't leave my children, or, you know, just to cover up, more like you are trying to protect your children more than yourself. So you become like almost sacrificing your suffering, your life to protect your children. So I think that's one of the things in our culture. We tend to do it mainly for our children. We think, oh, maybe until they are grown up, maybe that's when I can, you know, talk about it. And also to save, not save faces, but you think you want to protect your name, to protect your parents, so to speak, or your tribe. Otherwise people will think that, oh, what's wrong with that family? You know, their daughters are always having all these problems. So to keep the honor of the family, you may end up going through all these challenges, not seeking help. And the other thing would also be, maybe you have no one to really confide in. You feel that maybe somebody will go around telling your story. So you may find that people don't really have people that they can confide in. So within that society. So again, that service that is there should be something that people have confidence in, that they can rely on, where they don't hear their stories being used as an example somewhere, and they can identify that actually they are talking about me. So it's, how do we have a service that does not use information they get from the public?
Thank you, Grace. Yeah, I think you raised some really good points there. It's I think when you're saying it's about how people can perceive you, I think it is about face. It's about saving face, because, you know, it's almost about like your family's reputation in that regard, and it's about how people see you. So I definitely agree with you there, thinking that's an important factor. I saw Lorraine, you came off the microphone. Did you want to say something? Came off the mute, whatever it's the microphone. If you want to say something, please do. Or anybody else.
Also, I think, if I may come in there, Sahib, from the previous conversations again, we know that there has been, there is something around not being aware of the services around. And even if they're aware of the services, they don't feel that it is necessary to be seeking for support on matters to do with domestic abuse, purely because maybe from their experience in the past, that's something that is normal, common within their setting. And that really, you know, that lack of awareness of the support available, and that culture of having, you know, having that violence being normal, will get in the way of people seeking support, and really even feeling comfortable to talk to somebody about it.
Thank you, Cecily. Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it, with it's such a weird kind of feeling when you know the support is there, but you don't know if you can take yourself there, if you can bring yourself to actually accessing it. It's a whole different story, isn't it? Would anyone else like to follow up on that or make their own points?
Sometimes this family pressure, because the family members think that she's complaining. They don't think that she's talking about her situation. They think that she's complaining about her situation, which makes more, which makes the situation even worse.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the family pressure also, and some ladies, they don't want the other friends to know about her situation. They want to hide her personal things. That's another point.
Thank you. I agree, and that links to what Grace said about it's hard to find people to talk to about it when your family puts pressure on you, and maybe you don't want friends to know either. Then it kind of puts you in a very sticky position there.
Yeah.
So thank you, Gurdeep. Would anybody else like to share anything they feel about this? Maybe those who said that they're unsure of the second question.
I was going to say something and I've completely forgotten what it is already. What was it? Oh yeah. I wonder whether people who may be going through something and want to ask for help, like going for that very first step and asking for help, feels like a really big thing, but they might not have done it loud enough, and therefore they might not have gotten all the help that they've wanted, and therefore they're like, well, I've asked for help and I didn't get what I needed, so I'm not going to do that again because I put myself out there. And I just wonder whether, I don't know, there's something we can do to like help with like giving people the confidence to like speak a bit louder and make sure that their voices get heard in that way. Did that make sense to people?
Yeah. Annalise, I think, we, when we are taking history from patients and whatever, we don't follow it up well enough. Somebody will drop a hint, but we don't think about it and ask questions, probing questions. So I mean, this is professionals' fault. So Annalise, what you're saying is, lack of, I mean, how should I put it? It's an error on professionals' part. People drop hints, but we don't follow it well enough to get to the bottom of the situation. We brush it because we are busy, lack of staff and all that. Things that we should follow, we don't. You see, just like recently, the boy in the news who was murdered, there may be signs and symptoms which we didn't pick it up. So lack of skills, and lack of, is a problem on professionals' parts rather than, so the blame is on us now, isn't it? Yeah, so, we should take the blame in some way. People may be shy to say something, but they drop a hint. So it's up to us to follow up and find out more and then offer the necessary help. I think that's what Annalise is trying to say, isn't it? Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes, women, the men may be holding big positions in public. At public, they satisfy the public, but when they come home, they do all sorts of stuff to the people at home. And women, they don't want to go and say something to disgrace the man in public. Because I've come across some men who, outside the home, they are like, gods. And yet what you hear they are doing from in the house is not right. But the women don't feel like saying it to disgrace the men. So, I've come across situations like that as well. So I have to mention it.
Very common, and it's because most of those things are not talked about in public.
Yeah.
And clearly not from such big men and women.
Yes. So size, you have to learn from that. They say there's a saying that public something and then home broke or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They'll be spending outside the home, where when they come to home, they don't even provide chop money, they say, money to eat. But
Yeah.
they go outside, they buy things for people, and then the family suffer.
Yeah.
They don't give money and maintain the family. So things like that happen as well. So.
And that is why groups like the men's group that is run by ACAM becomes quite important, because those are some of the issues that they discuss within the forum.
Yeah.
Just to raise that awareness. They already know, but actually they don't do it. But by having those conversations helps them realize the duty they have or the obligation they have for their families.
Yes.
So, okay. Very good conversation there. Thank you, Sahih, for those generating that huge, heavy conversation from those two questions. So we'll move on to watching a short video clip to reinforce that, because what you hear is what is being emphasized on.
Yes.
Seeking for support and really feeling comfortable to do it, but also trying to understand why, or services trying to understand why people would not seek for support. So after we watch it, we'll bring Sophie in to tell us more about the support out there that we could effectively be accessing. So let me share this for now. Okay. So from the previous slide, you will have noticed that it is everybody's business.
Yeah.
We all have a role to play when it comes to matters of gender violence, gender-based violence. So what is your part? But let's hear from this short video clip here. Oops. I hope I can play it.
And men and
Okay, so it's all there now.
Gender-based violence, or GBV, refers to any harm inflicted against a person's will. It results from discrimination and unequal power on the basis of gender roles and norms. It is an umbrella term for various forms of violence that can affect people of all genders, such as child marriage, intimate partner violence, sexual and emotional violence. It is used to establish or reinforce gender inequalities. GBV is widespread and disproportionately affects women and girls, with 1 in 3 worldwide experiencing physical and sexual violence. During crises, the risks of GBV can greatly increase, especially for those with least power, voice, and access to services or resources. Although we need to deliver immediate and life-saving assistance, if we don't recognize and address gender inequality and the risks of GBV, we may miss vital opportunities to assist those who are most in need, or may unintentionally expose them to further harm.
So what must we do? Recognize that GBV is a life-threatening issue and assume it is happening regardless of whether incidents have been verified. Follow global guidelines and collaborate with specialists to look for GBV risks. Insecure shelters and gender-unaware camp design may increase risks of sexual violence. Schools and recreational activities, vital for the well-being of crisis-affected children, can also increase risks of GBV. As humanitarians, it is our responsibility to mitigate, prevent, and within our capability, respond to GBV. We must identify and address the different needs, capacities and vulnerabilities of girls, boys, women and men, and reduce their risks to GBV. Speak with vulnerable groups to identify and mitigate safety risks in your design, delivery and evaluation of assistance. Address root causes of gender inequality by promoting the equal rights of women and girls and other marginalised groups. Engage men and boys as advocates for gender equality and ending GBV. Reporting of GBV incidents is hindered by stigma and risks of further violence. This multiplies the physical, emotional and social effects of GBV. It can restrict reporting rates and survivors' access to services. Specialists must provide gender-sensitive services without delay and establish confidential referral systems. Survivors' rights and informed consent are central. Prioritise safety, confidentiality, respect and non-discrimination in your response. Non-specialists also have a key role to play. If someone discloses an incident to you, remember to look, listen and link to information on available support. It is everyone's responsibility to prevent, mitigate and respond to GBV. Together, we can stop gender-based violence.
Very useful there.
Yeah.
And I know you're already presenting different groups or networks out there, but let me hear what you think about watching that short video clip there. Any thoughts, comments, highlights?
I think it was nice that it was they were talking about gender sensitive services. You know, that stuck out to me as something they clearly cared about.
Yeah. And also the emphasis that it is, gender-based violence is life-threatening. Yeah. In as much as it's not about control, let's think about the life. Yeah, and this is where we say one too many. So if we can salvage one life, we will have done our job well. And so having 21 of us here as community champions gives clear indication of the magnitude of the impact that we would have in saving our communities. And really, when you're talking about well-being, we're talking about the impact that the violence has on an individual. I think about the mental health issues and even the physical health side of things. So the impact is huge, and if we all have a role to play, then it shows how many lives we will have saved within our communities. And on that, at that point, I will bring Sophie in to tell us a little bit more about the. Welcome, Sophie.
Hello. Sorry, I'm still wrapped up in my scarf. I'm still freezing as well.
I don't blame you. It's too cold.
The sun is just about to come round into my sitting room, and actually then gets very warm, so I'll probably be warm this afternoon. So Cecily and I met recently, and I guess we met because we were trying to do some like joint up working, and I know obviously you've been talking about kind of how easy or difficult it might be to talk to people about domestic abuse. So my role, I'm the domestic abuse coordinator for Bracknell and Windsor Maidenhead. And I think you guys are kind of from all over the place, aren't you? But in Berkshire, you're all Berkshire based, yeah. So basically there's one of me in each of the local authorities, and our kind of roles are to kind of try and coordinate services and raise awareness and pull things together. And we like to think we do a good job and that people are aware of things, but as you kind of obviously identified, is that people still don't know really, I think, where to go, and that shame and all those kind of things as well. So there are so many different support services, and again I think that's kind of quite difficult because people move into different areas, and actually they might have received a service in one area, and actually where they then move to, if they're fleeing domestic abuse, that service might not be there. So for example, support groups for children who are to domestic abuse. Some areas run them, some don't. And even with like perpetrator work, you know, there's not a huge amount out there in terms of perpetrators looking to, you know, change their behaviour unless they're already in the system and go through probation. And, you know, so in terms of community perpetrator work, there's not a huge amount, and it is kind of patchy across different areas. So, for example, in my area, in Bracknell and Windsor Maidenhead, we do some perpetrator work, but it is through children's social care. So again, you kind of have to be in the system to kind of access that support. So I think kind of individually, there are kind of lots of different examples of best practice. You know, if you look across Berkshire, there's 6 local authorities. It does tend to be based, you know, kind of local authority wise. So there's one of me in Slough, one in Reading, she's just started last week, I think. And then West Berkshire have got one DA coordinator, and there's one in Wokingham. And then there are others across the Thames Valley. So I kind of think, you know, what we tend to do is to obviously do our work within our local authority, and we commission services. So again, obviously you've got different domestic abuse services. So in Windsor Maidenhead, we have a charity called the Dash Charity. In Slough, they have an organisation called Hestia. In Bracknell, we have Berkshire Women's Aid, and I think they work obviously in Reading as well. And then you've got A2 Dominion in West Berkshire, and they've just changed services in Wokingham. They've got Cranston, which is the organisation. So again, for a victim, I think kind of moving across different areas, again, trying to get your head around, and even practitioners, because some of you will cover wider areas than one local authority. So if you're kind of like, right, who am I speaking to today, and where do they live, and what's you know, what service have I got to kind of signpost them to? So I think as professionals, it's really important to kind of know which services operate where, rather than you kind of telling victims, oh, go to that person or that organisation, then they pick up the phone and actually they say no, you know, local authority. So raising awareness is such a big thing about just trying to let people know what services there are. So I kind of meet with my counterparts across the Thames Valley. So actually we're meeting next week. And again, we look at, you know, what's going on from a Thames Valley perspective, because actually we can learn things from other areas. So actually if Oxford say they're doing something and it sounds really good, you know, is it something that actually we've got a need for locally? So yeah, so I just think it's, you know, it's not just linking up with other support services, but it's, you know, kind of other areas as well. And obviously, like the government have got their kind of, they've got their violence against women and girls strategy that they published in the summer. And we looked at that, you know, we looked at what we should be doing. I think they're publishing a separate domestic abuse strategy next year. And we're just in the process of rewriting, but each area will have their local response to what they identified as needs in the community. And they'll be looking to fulfill those needs. But, you know, we want victims to be able to know where to go for help, and can they access that help? As you were kind of saying about the stigma, but it could be, you know, people talk about culture as well, but, you know, it could be language barriers, it could be little things. I always remember this from a training session I went on, and, you know, we talk about having our meetings with, say, victims or clients or whatever you kind of call the people you work with, but there was somebody who was talking about, I think they were from Bath and North East, they went down the West Country, and they were trying to meet with a family who think their daughter or somebody in their family had been killed by their partner. So they would meet. So the local authority and the partners wanted to meet with the family. So I think they made an appointment to come into the the council offices, and they really struggled with that because they just didn't have the finances or anything like that. So I kind of think, you know, we kind of think, oh yeah, we can set up these meetings. And I know that with COVID, obviously we've gone a lot online and that can help. But again, you know, it's taken me a long time to get used to doing stuff online. So I think, you know, we need to make it ourselves as easily accessible to people as well. So we can't just say, oh, just come into the offices, because as I said, this family didn't actually even have the money for a bus fare for them to come in. So they kind of turned it around and they went to go and visit them in their home. And I think when they visited the home, they really saw the poverty that this family were kind of in, and started to understand that actually that was a real barrier for them to actually be able to access services as well. So they just didn't have the finances to, say, get on a bus and physically get to locations as well. So I think kind of it's really important that we have the services, that we make them accessible for people. and just think about the barriers to why somebody might not be able to access them, because there's no point in having all these services if actually people aren't able to use them or don't know about them. And somebody also touched upon, I think when you were doing the questions, about getting a bad response. So if they go somewhere and get a bad response and go, well, you know what, it's better for me to live with the abuse, it might be pushed back into that situation for years, you know, and we have had victims who have lived with it most of their lives because that bad service, and that might have been years ago, and you know, we know that, you know, things do move forward, but you know, the victim doesn't know that. They just remember that negative experience. It could be the I know we're kind of talking more around females, but you know, we locally recently found a male who had literally kind of been told, oh, you're big enough and strong enough to be able to kind of defend yourself against your female partner, and that's what he was kind of told in many words, and that's, you know, recent, I'd say in the last couple of years. And, you know, for him, he's going to go, well, if people think that, why am I even going to bother to access services? So, you know, it's important to challenge that. It's important to address it, and I think remind victims as much as you can that yes, if they did get a poor response, then that shouldn't be what they got, but to still try and encourage them. But it can be incredibly difficult to change that mindset for a victim to go, you know what, somebody, you know, the help is there, but it can be really difficult. So, and as I said, I think we had a victim who'd moved from, say, Slough, Windsor, Maidenhead, or vice versa, and she couldn't understand why she couldn't have the same services that she'd had in her originating area. And it was because, as I said, you know, different areas provide different things, but it should be a postcode lottery for victims. You know, we should be trying to ensure that wherever a victim is in the country, and also to see the chat. I don't know if it's now, but if we come back to it, but yeah, you know, kind of raising awareness, as you were talking about, I think it was it Tomby who was talking about the friends and family, and I did put in the chat, there's a recent document I found from the Holly Gazzard Trust around advice for friends and family, so I popped the link in the chat as well. So again, it's in the community, just trying to kind of, this is that you talk about it at home if it's suitable, and just try and kind of, you know, again in schools and with young people, you know, trying to make sure that they know what a safe and healthy relationship is, because if they're growing up watching it, I'm not saying that every child watching it is going to turn into, you know, the same, you know, victim or perpetrator, because there's plenty of examples where that doesn't happen, but you know, just modeling like what a healthy relationship is. You know, if it's not going to be done at home, then schools and education and that kind of thing is really important as well. So at Maidenhead, we've got a worker who goes into schools and does some work. I think Berkshire Women's Aid in some areas does do some work as well, but you know, but again, it doesn't really kind of happen standard across the area or the patch. So yeah, I don't know, Cecily, is that the kind of thing you wanted me to talk about? So Cecily and I met because we've started a Berkshire-wide group, but actually it spills into some parts of Hampshire and Surrey, where our kind of leads are. But we're looking at barriers that people from marginalised Black and minority ethnic groups might have issues in terms of seeking help for domestic abuse and sexual abuse. There was a Thames Valley-wide project, and they came out with a number of recommendations. And so this Berkshire-wide group is looking to how we can actually implement those recommendations. Because again, you know, kind of people just find it difficult from various backgrounds to actually seek help and support. So that's how Cecily and I have met. This group has only just recently started, so it's fairly new on the ground, isn't it, Cecily? So is that anything else, Cecily, you wanted me to?
Yeah, very useful information there, Sophie. And I mean, the reason why I was very keen that you're here is to share that and to give the communities the confidence that support is there.
Yeah,
it's about knowing about it, but actually also trying to know what their rights are, so that when they don't get positive experience, once they access the services, then they have a right to talk about it. Yeah,
I would also say as well, there's always one case that really sticks in my mind from years ago. So I'm not frontline anymore, I used to be. But it's also about, as professionals, for those of you who are professionals on the call, but knowing what agencies can and can't do. And I know that sounds really basic, but I'll always remember a lady who was coming down to Windsor Maidenhead, Liverpool, and she had been promised a 5-bedroom house in Windsor by somebody in, I think, children's social care in Liverpool. And she turned up in Windsor Maidenhead and was certainly not given that, there was no 5-bedroom house for her. She was incredibly let down. And that was all on the advice that somebody had given. And I just think you need to be careful about what you're saying to victims, because they will take that information. That's what I'm going to get. That's, and so then they will feel let down because they're not getting that. It's just because, that service might not be available or whatever. So I think we just need to be careful about, especially in different areas, just kind of recommend, we might say, oh, well, in our area, we've got children's support groups. So that must turn up in Sheffield or whatever. So again, it's just, just setting those expectations for people in the community. And again, I think people still think, oh, if I report to the police, it's going to go to court. It's going to, I'm not saying that things don't, some things obviously don't go to court and some people don't go to prison. But again, I think kind of just manage the expectations of, people, they are going to seek help, and just be wary of not over-promising things as well to them. But trying to kind of promote that, yes, there is a lot of support, and that things can change and there is a safer kind of life for them. So, yeah.
And really, Sophie, that's very useful to know, because what has been discussed in this forum as well, that it takes, especially people from the minorized communities, it takes them about 3 years before they can actually access the service. And once they do it, it will take about 5 years before they have been helped.
And I think kind of, again, people's needs differ as well. So I spoke to a lady, this was years ago, but she had, her children were no longer with her because I think of the domestic abuse. And she was in a property where there were lots of rent arrears, and she'd managed to cut those rent arrears down, but she still had a way to go, but they wouldn't move her. She was worried about being moved because actually she'd then be moved into a 1-bedroom place, and then what the impact that would be on then getting her children back living with her. So it's kind of like, people's needs change, I think. It's kind of situation as well. So I think that's why, that constantly needs to be looked at. And again, what's the perpetrator doing? And, if we are supporting a victim and their children, we need to be, well, what are we doing about the actual abuse? Is there support for the perpetrator? Are we going down the criminal justice route? What are we doing about the perpetrator as well? But as I said, that kind of support is often very patchy, and a lot more kind of focuses on the victim. It's a burden for the victim, thinking, well, actually, why should I be the one that moves, and why have I got to uplift everything? The children as well. So it can be very difficult.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure people have questions for you, so please ask Sophie.
Sophie, you won't believe it, but I attended one of your training sessions early last year.
When was it? Sorry, Grace?
Early last year, because I just retired from WAM. Windsor has got a Maidenhead.
Okay.
I just retired a year ago, exactly. And I attended one of your sessions.
Okay. Was it an online session?
No, physical, before all this.
Just before it all went wrong, yes.
In Maidenhead,
Yes, oh, hello again.
Hello, you won't believe it. Now, I just want to find out whether the Freedom Program is still in existence. And is it country-wise? Because I'm trying to ask some people in the north to access it from their local authorities. So
the Freedom Programme, for those of you who may or may not know what it is first, so it's a support group primarily for victims of domestic abuse. You need to be in an abusive situation, but it looks at obviously what they've experienced, and it looks at kind of healthy ways going forward as well. And it's 12 weeks, usually about 10, 12 weeks. So it is national in terms of the best thing to do, but again, it's like whether or not people keep things updated, is that if you Googled Freedom Programme, there is a Freedom Programme website. So the lady who wrote the programme has got her own website. And within there's a search facility to find out where in the country it's running.
Right.
run it. Obviously, she provides training. So I know in, say, Windsor Maidenhead, we do run it.
Yeah.
Bracknell, again, we do run it, but we also run something called the Choices Programme that Berkshire Women's Aid run, which they adapted from the Freedom Programme. I couldn't tell you across the rest of Berkshire who runs it. You're either best to speak to my counterpart in the rest of the areas, or go on that national website, and I think you can pick from, and I think with COVID as well, there's been a little bit stop start. Some people have been doing it virtually, some have then set up face to face, then it got stopped, there's more lockdown, so it might say that it's running, but actually because of COVID and whatever, it might have changed a bit. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're contacting areas. But I would use that national website and just the search facility, and fingers crossed details will be updated on there.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, very useful. Very useful. Thank you so much.
Move this a bit.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Lisa, I can see your email, your thing on the chat. So I've just pasted that into an email, and I will, I'll contact you if that's all right.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you, Sophie.
That's all right.
Grace has a question for you, Grace.
Is the
Yes,
double Grace again?
Yes, yeah, another Grace. So, Sophie, thank you very much for your talk. And I think you mentioned something about in terms of professionals when advising people about services, that one has to be careful of the words that they use, or not to overpromise things. Can you just give an example of, if you have somebody who's desperate and the services that are available, maybe, normally they'll take about 3 weeks, but then it may not turn out to be the case. So how would you handle that situation?
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, you're going to have to say this again, Grace. So you're speaking to a victim.
Yes. And then normally your procedure is such that, within 3 weeks, things will be flowing in place.
Yeah.
But chances are it may not work out to be the case. So how would you handle that situation? How would you explain that to the victim?
So what service are you from the community, or where do you kind of sit, Grace?
So really, I'm not really from I'm just an ordinary citizen who is interested in things, but it's trying to find the right ways of handling some.
Yeah. Well, it's always difficult to put timescales on things, isn't it? When you're kind of saying to people, somebody will, like, I know that I'm quite responsive on emails. I always say to people, I will email you, people can know that they get quite a quick response from me. But, I know other people who don't. And I think when you're talking about services, you would, unless they kind of advertise that, we aim to get back to you within a number of hours or whatever, it can be very difficult to say to somebody. I would just be wary about kind of even putting a time scale on things, because, especially like coming, I don't mean to sound awful, but, you've got Christmas kind of coming up, people do go on leave and kind of things like that. But you've got to always remember that, there is always support available. You've got if you haven't got, all the local domestic abuse services, I would have thought will be operating over Christmas. Some of them aren't, I think Berkshire Women's Aid is 24 hours, but some of them aren't always. I don't think the Dash Charity is 24 hours in Windsor Maidenhead. If there's a lot, we would always encourage you to go to your local services first, but there is also the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, 24/7 as well. But, when you're talking about, I would just be careful. Like, if you definitely don't know how long you don't know how long people are going to take to get back to people, or, and for some people, if you're talking about, we do a thing around, I don't know if this is kind of what you're talking a bit about as well. If somebody said to you, well, how long is it going to be before I feel better about things? We know that it takes victims a long time to leave abusive relationships. They might go back, try something else and keep going back and forward for whatever reasons. And, it'll all be up to individual people as to how long it will take them to, I guess, recover from domestic abuse. And again, kind of how much support they get given. But I said I would just be, I just wouldn't overpromise that, and tell them that agencies are going to get back to them within a set amount of time, because we just don't really know that, do we?
No.
Yeah, and especially when we are talking about accommodation, and you are having to deal with the council for that, or the housing for that to happen, then it becomes a real problem to the victim, especially in managing their mental health when they miss the accommodation at the expected time.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell you, you know, I don't know what the waiting lists are, you know, in the different areas for housing. You know, somebody said to me not that long ago, somebody they were working with been on a housing list for like 7 years or something ridiculous. I mean, well, it sounds, I don't want to say, I know this is being recorded, but you know, it sounds awful that somebody's got to wait 7 years to find permanent accommodation. But you know, I don't know what the waiting lists are, and I think kind of things have changed in terms of the law. I think kind of victims of domestic abuse are being given kind of greater priority, but that's not going to say that, oh yeah, tomorrow you're going to be able to move into whatever, because again, it depends on how much availability there is. You know, this lady coming from Liverpool, she had 4 children. Now, how many houses are available for these bigger, you know, bigger families as well? And I think that's been an upcoming issue in terms of need, is that there are more larger families. And then again, that puts the victim in a really difficult situation. Are they going to wait and wait and wait for something to become suitable, or do they potentially get faced with having to maybe leave some of the children, or, you know, start splitting up the family? I don't know. So it can be really difficult. And again, that's then again another barrier. The victim might think, well, you know, what's the point? I'm not going to leave 2 of my children with the abuser or send them to my mum and dad's type of thing. You know, I need to keep us all together. So again, they might just say, well, you know, it's going to be better for me to perhaps stay.
So Lida, it's all about managing expectations.
Yeah. Sorry, Grace, I'm not sure I answered your question.
Yeah, any other question for Sophie?
Is that right?
Yeah. Just a very simple question, short question, Sophie, while you're there, is on the how you link up with the health services, and especially the mental health, you know, services.
How I link up with them?
Yeah, it's a service.
As I said, so I'm not really a service, so I'm a person, I guess. But so we have domestic abuse forums in my area, and it gets, sorry, this light is just, the sun is coming around really quickly. So we have domestic abuse forums in our area. So they're like multi-agency meetings, a bit like, you know, obviously you guys kind of coming together. But we have quarterly meetings, and we invite all the different services to come together, and we use those opportunities to do networking. And we have various presentations come in from other areas. So for example, there's just been, I don't know if you know the organisation called Support You. They're in Reading. They support LGBT plus communities. So they've just started, or they've been given some funding to work across the whole of Thames Valley. So for example, he came to the last domestic abuse forum in Bracknell and gave a whole presentation on what services they can offer. So everybody sitting on the domestic abuse forum will be there in a professional capacity. So it's not members of the community as such, but they will, you know, that's kind of trying to raise their awareness of what services there are available. So if they have got a victim who is maybe a lesbian and suffering domestic abuse, they could go, well, actually, there is this support service available, and then they can kind of signpost and refer. So we try to do that, and we, so we have like we do get mental health who comes to those meetings as well in my kind of patch. But again, in Reading and different areas, whether or not they've got those networking forums, I don't know. You probably just need to check with my counterparts. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh, can I just ask quickly, Sarah, sorry, do you have churches as well in your forums attending? Because
no, we don't, Grace. And, you know, like we would like to encourage, you know, all different kind of, I guess, because we talked about that a little bit in our Berkshire-wide group. So I was trying to put together this kind of resource list of support services, and in some of them that have come through from others, churches have been listed. And yeah, we haven't done, you know what, I've been doing this job for years and years and years, and I've personally never done much work with the churches. I'd like to. I remember a conference in London, and we had, I think, Jewish Women's Aid. We had lots of different kind of other, you know, church related. I think there was somebody from the Catholic. I can't remember what it was. There was another church there as well. And there was even like a domestic abuse handbook that had been circulated as well. And unfortunately, I would say it's not been an area, I think, that we've given much not thought to, but you know, we just haven't made many links. So actually, it's probably something I could look at for my patch anyway. But whether or not any of the other areas do, I don't know.
Yeah,
because faith groups as well, like mosques, and you know, because I think in Maidenhead, I remember years ago they were doing a whole load of work with mosques around safeguarding generally in children. But yeah, no, it's a good point, Grace.
Yeah, because I think because I with my church, they've just written a new document that's going to be released this December on domestic abuse and gender-based violence. And I think, yeah, so it would be good to see how best we could make links.
Where are you, Grace? Where are you?
I'm in Oxford.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've got a very good counterpart for Oxford City. She's lovely.
Okay.
And then there's an Oxfordshire domestic abuse coordinator. So yeah, no, they might be interested. I don't know if they've done any other work with churches. But
yeah. Would it be possible to get the link to your counterpart in Oxford?
Yeah, no, I can do. So I'll send those through to Cecily.
Yeah.
And as you be aware, I think the churches have done huge amount of work, especially through COVID, in supporting women going through domestic abuse. And even before COVID, there is a lot of work that goes on in the religious centers in supporting women, and services have not always been very good in linking up with them. But I think it would be nice to hear, the experiences from a spiritual, point of view.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Sophie. It seems you've really given us useful information in terms of how we can connect with the services, and especially to evidence that point that it is everybody's business.
Yeah.
Sharing useful information is everybody's business, and I think that's how we are going to be the change that we seek when it comes to gender violence. So very, very useful. And at that point, then James is now with us from the mental health side of things. It would be nice to hear what you have for us today, James. And then we'll take it from there.
Yes, thank you, Cecily. Thank you so much. And also, Sophie, just probably I'll also be linking with you because I'm doing a lot of work within the IAP services within Berkshire around engaging with people from the ethnic and cultural diverse background or grouping and all the rest of it. And my work will be really around engaging people and how services can position themselves around working with people from a very equal front, if you like, and also managing all of those issues that you mentioned. And so many people, even Grace mentioned about working with faith leaders and faith communities, and also working around the gaps that exist. We talk about managing expectation and all of those things. So just going back to the family issues that we've been talking about, there are a few quotations to help us get good understanding. And one of them, which I've written, these are all on Google anyway, but just for good explanation, good understanding, is not all that we face can be changed, but nothing can be changed if we don't face them. So basically what this is telling us is about trying to really reach out to some of the difficulties and what can happen in families when, I think it was Grace that was talking about, men can go and do wonderful things outside. They come back home, they do something completely different. It's really about also listening and also trying to be available to pursue with dialogue rather than argument. And I can just give an example. I have two people who, the husband will go to work and we contact the wife at work during lunchtime. There will be a lovely conversation, and that will be the time the wife will take time off just to listen to the contact from the husband. And one day, I think the husband was caught in a lot of work at work, and he wasn't able to call at all. And the lady, on the other hand, took time out without checking whether the husband is free or not. And she became really angry. Instead of really contacting him to say, well, I was really expecting your call, and the thing was an argument. I was expecting call from you, how you kind of complain and just really attacking the guy and wasn't really able to understand. But when the guy said, at that particular point in time, I would have called you, I was caught up with something. And by the time I actually finished with what I was going to do, I called, by then you were gone. I think really basically what is happening there is about how do you prioritize conversation and dialogue rather than argument and debate and attack and defend, because when there's defensive mechanism in any relationship, it becomes very difficult for people to listen to each other. When there's an attack in the relationship, again, it helps people to just cut off and they go away from you because there's nothing they can see from you apart from being attacked. So it's really important for us to bear that in mind. I'm not saying what Grace said is completely uncommon, but what is also common is about the attack, the defensive mechanism, the readiness for people to change people, which is not possible. You have to change your behavior. My daddy will always say, change your behavior around somebody. They probably begin to change because if they see you behaving differently, it will be quite difficult for them not to check why is this person no longer attacking me. They will begin to wonder, has she gone above or is this something happened? So it's really about that maturity we need to take to check in terms of how we manage active dialogue rather than argument or attack or defense. And the other part of the quotation really is, if I cut you off, chances are you actually handed the scissors to me. It's really about our behavior that can make people cut off. So really what this is telling us is really to be open and available for people to talk. Even if somebody is hurting you, it's really important to listen to what is causing the problem. What are they hurting you? What is the problem? What are the factors there? And these are the reasons why we need to really work together as a family unit and as a community. I know Cecily was talking about it, and we are 20 here as activists, maybe vigilantes, if you like, but for me, I like to call myself as community activists, working with my community to be empowered to seek what is needed and also to be able to express their needs, bridging that gap we talk about. So it's really about listening. Sometimes listening can be very powerful. And silence can be a bit difficult for some people, but it's healing. It's really powerful when you just sit there and listen to somebody and say, I can understand. I can imagine how difficult that is. That can actually begin to tell them how compassionate you are and how much you really have interest in what they're actually going through, rather than giving advice even before they tell you what is happening to them. So that's really one of the things I want us to do as a community. The last bit, really, the quotation here really is, sometimes problems don't require solutions to solve them. Instead, they require maturity to outgrow them or to really become mature around some of these problems. And it can happen between husband and wife, between you and your children, and between you and your friend, between you and colleague, or you and your boss. So basically, to bring that to our topic as a community, it's really about how we constantly need to empower ourselves to be mature. And I think we've listened to Sophie and so many people with information that can help us build those confidence and maturity. It's really about trying to understand what is important. And one of the examples that we've been really looking at when Sophie gave us some of those examples, I think Grace also mentioned, Cecily and so many other people, is about referral outward or signposting to people. It's just like when somebody is tense or anxious and you advise them to go for a short walk. It's not going to be possible. The muscles are strongly tense. How can they walk in the first place? You need to calm them down before they can actually start walking. By that, I mean, if somebody's sitting in front of you, and most of the time for us professionals, I have actually come to realize we don't even know what other services are doing, but we like to refer people to them. So it's really important to know, to be able to explain what they are doing, what they do, what is their timeline, what do they do, how do they do it. So it's really important. I think, Cecily, this type of forum will be important for us to really start identifying other services that will benefit our people, to start bringing them together so that people know what each others are doing. You can't refer signpost to somebody where you don't know. It's like if you take your car, you want to go to London, you don't know London. It can be very difficult. to get there. So you need to know London before you can actually go. And also it's easy, but that's just an example of what we do. We signpost people to London. They've never been there. We signpost them to services they don't even know about. So it's really important to find time to explore together. Tell the patient or the client that, look, let's work on this. You go and come again next time. I'm going to search for this particular service. So by then, we will know what this service is. Give them homework. You go and do some search, ask some questions, and tell me exactly what you would like to benefit from them. But it's not about us, it's about the patients most of the time. So it's really important to know what they need before you can actually signpost them. So that's really quite important. So I got a few information here for services within Berkshire or within, Berkshire. So let me just share them with you guys and see. I know Sophie mentioned a bit, or quite a lot. We start off with addiction services. We have services called the Narcotic Anonymous, and they have a telephone number. We also have Alcoholic Anonymous. They have telephone numbers. Don't worry, I'm going to send all of this to Cecily, so we'll find time to share all of this with you. And you can also have people who are struggling with overeating. There is a service, and they can also meet on Sundays, and they actually live in Faith, which is not too far from us. And we also have eating disorders. This is free helpline also. They also offer a lot of support and eating disorders as well. And we have gambling anonymous as well. If you are really addicted to gambling, there are services within Berkshire. And also people who are addicted to sex or love, or these are all services that are available. So they can also do virtual support as well. And then moving away from there, we come to emotional disorders and difficulties. So we have like panic helpline. Again, I'm going to send all of these documents. I will not be able to download them on the chat today. And then we have the Samaritans. Most of you must have heard about them, but they also do offer support. We have a campaign against living miserably. We also have services that can help people to reach quality of their life, and helpline for men who are feeling down. Also, that also is available here. I can also send that so that we can share that with you guys. And we also have bereaved and suicide services. They are also existing in Berkshire and all around the country as well. So we have their helpline is also there. And we also have talking therapies, for which I work. And there's a number here for them as well. And they provide a lot of support around all the mental health disorders, this depression, anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, specific anxiety, phobia, social phobia, agoraphobia, PTSD, OCD, and all of those panic disorders. They can provide and support you. They have different levels in terms of whatever can fit you. So it's really important. Cruise, bereavement care, there's a helpline here. Services Users Network, which is called SON. I think we've heard about them. They do exist. And the address is here also. They can also support. If we move away from there, we also move into crisis helpline. For example, people who are being tormented with suicide thoughts, and and how to help them prevent, particularly young people. There's a number here for them as well. And there's also another one that help young people below 35. We've been having some sessions around mental health issues that most of the time mental health service disorders may start in young people at as far as age 9. And then after that, begin to really increase. So it's really important for us parents who are on this forum to know about that. And there's also a mixed helpline, which is also around support for people who are struggling with confidence and all of those things. Again, there's a helpline for that as well. And also shouting, just saying I'm in crisis, there's also helpline for that as well. So there's so many helplines available. And rape crisis, there's also a helpline, and also there's their website, and also there's an email I can give to people as well. Recently, BHFT, Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust, has started something called Breathing Space, where you can actually just step in and walk in Reading, and they are available. They can actually support you with your mental health problems. They can signpost you to the relevant services. And then if we look at the secondary mental health services, and somebody was asking whether Sophie is connected to any of them, but we have the Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust, and which I work for, I think, which Cecily also worked for. We have the Gateway system, which is the first port of call if you haven't been into any mental health services before. And so they can provide you that initial assessment and they can signpost you accordingly. And all new referrals via common point of entry, most of you probably may know this if you live in Berkshire, that this common point of entry has been existing for nearly 5 or more years now. And that's how you come into secondary services. So their number is here. Again, we're going to signpost that as well. The older person's mental health team is also available. And I have the number. They're actually just by the Prospect Park Hospital in Reading called Hazelwood. So they also provide a lot of mental health support for older adults. And there's a crisis team, which I used to work with before. The number is there. There's also psychological medicine services. It used to be the liaison services. It's actually in RBH Royal Berkshire Hospital. So if you went there, if you do any self-harm, or you contemplating or having thoughts to end your life, or you made any attempt, if you go to RBH, they will signpost you to the psychological medicine services called PMS. They will assess you in the hospital there, and they don't exist in the community, but they're in the hospital, but they link in with all the community services so they can signpost you to them appropriately. So that also exists. So don't be put off by anything if your child or you or anybody, family member, is having problem with thoughts around ending their life. There are a lot of services within BHFT that can be able to support you. So you can call the ambulance. If you can drive them to RBH, Royal Berkshire Hospital, there's a mental health service there. So they will look at you. They also have the local older adult mental health services as well in the same place in Royal Berkshire Hospital. So either way, you'll be supported. They have service for young people, for adults of working age and older adults. So again, these are all existing there. There's also Berkshire West Young Way or Your Way. There's another support mechanism that is provided, and also Recovery in Mind. So there are a lot of services. And then we've heard about the Reading Campus Recovery College. Again, I think Ashley mentioned that quite recently. So there are so many other mental health services that are actually there together for mental well-being, 52 Walnut Tree, and these are all services, although they might be nationally driven, but you can have local support system as well. And also Mental Health Matters, these are all services. I have their website or their email to send to you. But what is really here for us is really to do how we manage relationship around some of these difficult things that we go through, whether it's to do with rape, mental health problems, or issues to do with relationships. So it's really important for us to bear in mind that help is out there for you to tap in. But at the same time, it's really important to see how active dialogue can actually help, and also knowing people around you who can support you, whether it's to do with your pastor or your faith group or whatever. It's really managing those conversations at that level is really important. And I think on that note, I would like all of us to look after our mental health, because whatever happens in all of those other areas, whether it's an abuse in the family or in the community, it can have an impact on our mental health problems. And I know the recent news around COVID is also causing a lot of anxiety, but there are a lot of services out there that can actually help. Family support is also quite key. Community support is also key. And I think this forum has been like a rock or a heavy backbone for a lot of us. I must say, all of us waiting every Thursday or Tuesday to come to these to talk about issues that we probably find difficult to talk about in other areas. I think is something that we really need to treasure. And I just want to say thank you for all of your contributions and what we've been able to share. Thank you and have a lovely week.
James, thank you so much for that very useful information. Nina has a message there that we can add all those contacts to the service guide.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, go on, Nina.
Please, James, if you are able to check on the Reading Services Guide, because you've given so many very useful resources there. There are some already on there, like Compass Recovery College, for example. I know it's on the Reading Services Guide. But if there are any that you feel would be beneficial to be on there, because it's really the kind of online resource portal that we try to feed into to let everyone know what's available.
Yeah, that's fine, Nina. I will do that. And I also want to make, while you're there, Nina, we are planning, I mean, in collaboration with Cecily's and group and also the men's group, we really want to have a conference where we invite all of these people, because we need to start talking together, because we are dealing with the same person, but we don't see each other. And I think it's so difficult for people when everybody's dealing with them, but they don't know what everybody's doing, and I think it's not good for them. We just really trying, we are setting them to fail if we do that. So we need to come maybe in the new year, and I will need your support with that.
Fantastic. Yeah, and before we end, Constance, we can't go away without you telling us a bit about the Goddess.
Well, I'm going to look at it this way. I was trying to get in a long time ago, but I couldn't. And I just wanted to squeeze in this question. Grandma and grandpa, and grandma and grandpa, they're Golders. Being financially abused by grandchildren. Where do we go to? Where do they go to? And yes, they can come to the Golders Luncheon Club for lunch and to play games and do some artwork, line dancing, and other things. But in our group, we also have these problems. And what I've been hearing are solutions to maybe middle-aged people, young people with abuse. And over again, we hear that, but we don't hear about abuse amongst the older people. And we're just wondering why. Have we been just carted off to the Naka yard or what? Why there's nothing being mentioned about grandma and grandpa, the Golders? We have problems also, especially with being financially abused by our grandchildren. James, to whom do we go? To whom do we turn?
Yes, Constance, that's a very, very relevant question. I think we need a whole program on that. I would really imagine. I think probably Cecily and I, we hang head together, and yourself, Constance, to come up with a meeting where we can actually try to pull some of these out. But we also need to invite some grandmas and grandpas to come to share their experiences so that we can actually look at whether there are any cultural issues to do with some of these things, whether there are any other problems that are linking some of these things will be really relevant for us, because it's not only about emotional, financial exploitation, it's also about the emotional part of it, because grandparents are people I don't know how to describe them, because there's no limit to how much we value them. Because I can remember my grandparents, she used to hide bananas in my bag, and I would go to school with no books but bananas, and imagine what that was, is care, love, and just comfort. And it's my grandmother told me that when you batch and you open your bowel, you're actually reducing the budget for a doctor. I never knew until now to put this together. All she was saying that good health is good living. And it depends on how your body functions. But for me, it was like, how? This old woman is just saying another thing today. But yeah, Constance, you're right. I think we need a whole time to talk about this thing, because we can't fit grandma and grandpa in a small box. We need a whole space, so that's my suggestion anyway.
Thank you very much. Yes.
We'll need a conversation on that, but in the meantime, there is Nina has kindly shared the contacts there for the safeguarding team.
Yes, any concerns that you have about abuse, you can report them anonymously on the Adult Care Safeguarding Adults number, 01189 373747. And then they can be, an investigation can be done, It's done very sensitively because obviously the safeguarding teams are very expert and skilled. But if you've got any concerns, you can call them and they will talk you through.
So Nina, that is adult safeguarding services, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Safeguarding adults, yes. So that's the
Okay.
number.